Welcome to the accessible audio version of the book Memories of Banbury by Marjorie Lester. In this episode you will hear an audio version of Chapter 2, Quaker Meeting and Public Houses, followed by audio versions of the credit slides, followed by audio descriptions of the paintings contained in Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Quaker Meeting and Public Houses. Read by Chris Beamond. Cedar Villa, Boxhedge, Neathrop, was the first home we had in Banbury. At the beginning of Boxhedge, before you came to Cedar Villa, was Bird's Farm House. It was a beautiful 16th century stone house. Daniel Bird, the farmer, was a town councillor. He wore a derby hat, buff-coloured knee-length coat and gaiters. His wife had been a county hockey player and ran a hockey team of local ladies. She and Mrs. Ayres and several others used to hire a barrel organ, dress up in gypsy costumes and go round collecting for town charities. They collected thousands of pounds. Many of the houses in Neathrop and Boxhedge were dreadful places, many families having to share one outside toilet and one water tap. They had no comfort or conveniences at all. Most of the people were out of work and were very poor indeed. Many of the children went barefoot, and when it was cold they had to stay huddled for warmth in bed. They didn't welcome strangers or people prying into their business. Many of the out-of-work men were demobbed soldiers who felt very bitter that nothing was being done for them and their families. I remember 2 ex-soldiers shooting themselves in despair at their hopeless situation. We soon made friends with our neighbours, especially my grandmother, Mrs. Ormiston Chant. My parents and grandmother were distressed at the poverty and suffering all around us, but there was not much that they could do, as they were quite poor themselves. However, they gave what sympathy and help they could. Cedar Villa was in a private road shut off from Boxhedge by an iron gate across the road. It had once been an old farmhouse and still had fields in front and a field at one side. The house was owned by Mr. Coleman, who'd left his wife and daughter, sold his good-class grocery business in Parson Street and had become a recluse. His wife rented us the house furnished with all its wonderful antique furniture and pictures for £3 a week. This was a lot of money in those days, and was much more than my parents could afford, but we had to live somewhere. We had no gas or electricity, used oil lamps and candles for lighting, and cooked on a coal-fired range. The roof leaked, and when it rained we had to put buckets and basins on the bedroom floors to catch the water. It had been a beautiful home with lovely garden, greenhouses and stables, but through neglect it was falling to bits. We stayed there a year. In my picture I've painted my father and mother, my grandmother and me coming home from a meeting. She was a great preacher and was invited to all sorts of places to speak. Also in the picture is Mrs. Smith, who did the washing and cleaning. The cocks and hens, Jean, our Airedale dog, the cat Keddle, and the dark dots are a family of hedgehogs. We had our big dog Jean because Mother was nervous as the house was isolated. Also, many strange-looking tramps would come begging. Although Neathrop, Boxhedge and Robins Island, which lay just behind our house, were the roughest areas in town, none of our neighbours was ever rude or unpleasant. Now the private road is open and all the greenhouses and stables have been knocked down and council houses have been built on the site. All that's left is a portion of the house which has been turned into 4 flats. Every Sunday morning we used to go to the Quaker Meeting House in the Horse Fair. The meeting house is the oldest place of worship in the town. Outside, the meeting house is much the same, but inside the big meeting room is no longer used for Sunday meetings and has been turned over to a playgroup. There are very few Quakers left now, but when we came to Banbury it was a very large meeting and many of the members had large families. The elders, who looked after the spiritual and moral affairs of the meeting, sat on a high bench facing the members. The overseers, who saw to the practical affairs of the meeting, sat on a bench below. Several of the very old Quakers wore the Quaker grey clothes, bonnets and wide hats, and addressed one another as thee and thou. Everyone was very kind and gentle to the children in the meeting, but we all had to sit perfectly still and quiet for an hour and a half. Miss Lizzie Brown of Brown's Cake Shop ran a Sunday school in the small meeting room, but as we were expected to memorise bits of the Bible, I preferred the proper meeting. When we lived at Cedar Villa, we used to walk up the Warwick Road to Drayton, passing the old barley mow. At the time, it was right in the country, away from any houses. On summer evenings, it was a popular walk for Banbury people. They used to sit outside the pub on benches having their drinks. The workhouse was also in Warwick Road, the last building in the town. It sheltered people who were destitute. There was no family life. Husbands, wives and children were parted. It was a grim old place, but at least it prevented people from starving. People called it the Spike. I don't know why. Tramps used to walk from town to town for a night's lodging in the different workhouses. They did some work for a basic meal and somewhere to sleep. You would see them coming out in the mornings, most likely going to walk to Chipping Norton. Every evening, tramps would gather waiting for a night's lodging. When they were admitted, their clothes were taken from them and sent down a large chute to a steam disinfector in the basement, where the clothes were steamed to kill lice and fleas, while the tramps had to take a bath. Next morning, after they'd worked for a night's lodging and meal, they went on their travels again. When we went into town from Cedar Villa, sometimes we used to walk along Castle Street. At the entrance to Castle Street, the Three Pigeons was on the left, and on the right was the Three Horseshoes. The road between the two pubs was just wide enough for a horse and cart to drive through. There was a smithy on the right-hand side behind the Three Horseshoes. It was owned by Mr. Hayden and his son. Everyone used to stop and watch the smiths at work. Castle Street has been widened, and the Three Pigeons is all that is left. Walking to the end of Castle Street, we came out to the marketplace by the Angel Public House. On market days, poultry, rabbits and eggs were sold on the road outside the Angel. The building is still there, but it's now a shop selling electrical goods. On the other side of the turnout of Castle Street was Blenco's Cake Shop. Mr. Blenco's Bakehouse was round the corner in Castle Street. The Bear Inn was in the corner of the marketplace with a model of a bear outside. Both buildings are still there. Castle Street North has been demolished and the Castle shopping precinct built on the site. The entrance to the precinct is between Blenco's and the Angel on the site of the old Castle Street Road. My favourite walk into the marketplace was into the Cornhill end. We walked through a funny small covered passage from Castle Street and came out beside the Plough Inn. There was a drinking water fountain in the middle of Cornhill, and the carrier's cart stopped there on market days. Next to the Plough Inn was the Vine Hotel. Originally it was built as a corn exchange, but the farmers didn't like it, preferring to do their trading in the covered yard behind the Red Lion in High Street. So the corn exchange was converted into the Vine Hotel. But about this time, the head of the goddess of plenty on the top of the building was struck by lightning and knocked off. Temperance people said it was judgment for turning the corn exchange into a pub. number 31, B.R. Morland ran the sub-post office and a stationery and printing business. Later he moved to High Street and his printing business to Gattridge Street, where he printed a weekly paper called The Advertiser. The printing works are now the Jehovah's Witness Hall. He also had a building and decorating business. Number 32 was Salmon and Catch, who made Banbury Rock in various flavours and colours, all sorts of sweets and very good ice cream. Later the business became Salmon and Sons and went on trading for many years. They also had a shop in the High Street. On the other side of the passage from the Castle Street was Gillett's Bank. William Charles Braithwaite was manager and a director of the bank, which later became Barclays Bank, moving to the corner of Broad Street and Bridge Street. He and his family lived in the corner beside the bank at Castle House. It is still there, but now it's very run down, and all the lovely gardens, tennis courts, summer house and greenhouses have gone and are part of a car park. Mr. and Mrs. Braithwaite were Quakers and did a great deal of work for the meeting in the town. They had 4 very clever children who were very much older than me. They gave children's parties to which I was always invited. I hated going as I was very shy and not clever enough to join in all the games they played. However, I loved William Charles as he took pity on me, making cut-out animals of bread and butter for me at tea. He died suddenly of a heart attack in 1922 and was very sadly missed in the town. Banbury Quaker meeting was never the same without him. Across from the Cornhill is 16 Market Place. It belonged to 2 brothers, G.F. and J.L. Robbins. They had a large, prosperous ironmongery and gunsmiths business. Like all the ironmongers in town, they put a display of their goods on the pavement outside the shop. It's a beautiful old shop in a magnificent state of preservation, thanks to Noel Robbins, who inherited it from his father and uncle, restoring it with great good taste. Next door, number 17, was W. Rayner's dress shop. He stocked smart, inexpensive clothes, usually in very bright colours and patterns, which were brought by young women who put down a small sum and then paid by the week for their clothes. The side of his shop had attractive window displays showing into the Palace Theatre foyer. He was a funny old man who wore a black derby hat, a black tailcoat and always carried a cane. He lived with his daughter and son-in-law, who were near neighbours of ours on Bloxham Road. Next came the Palace Theatre Company. It was bought in 1923 by the Lester brothers, Strouds and James Friswell, from J. H. Blinkhorn and Norman Blinkhorn, who had run a cinema there for many years. The new owners had the old cinema pulled down and built a brand new theatre in its place. They used the best of everything, furnishing it luxuriously. The ceilings and walls were tastefully painted and had attractive light fittings which dimmed to a pleasant glow during performances. There was lush carpeting in the foyer, up the stairs and in the auditorium. Brass jardinières with palms stood in the foyer and on the stairs. It was really much more comfortable than most of the patrons' homes. The usherettes had smart uniforms and the manager wore evening dress. There was a nice restaurant upstairs run by Mr. Bond of the Lorna Cafe, serving afternoon teas and coffee and ices in the evening. Many theatrical touring companies came, putting on good variety shows and plays. One of my favourites was the Forbes Robertson Company, who came twice a year, performing Shakespearean and contemporary plays. Occasionally there were films. The townspeople loved it, and all sorts of people patronised the theatre. including parties from the big houses round about who came in evening dress after their dinner parties. But the overheads were enormous, so gradually it became a cinema only. The usherettes still had smart uniforms, the manager his evening dress suit, but the restaurant was closed. The programmes were changed twice a week, and there were 2 performances each evening and matinee twice a week. Most people in the town were film fans, following the careers of film stars with great interest, going to the cinema regularly once a week. The best seats were in the balcony and cost 1 shilling and 6pence, and the cheapest seats were downstairs in the front, were 6pence. The Palace was a social meeting place and great entertainment for us all. Occasionally the theatre was closed for redecoration, but over the years it slowly became shabby until it closed down, and Mr. Mansfield opened it as a toy arcade. Finally, the Midland Bank bought the building, pulling down the theatre but retaining the front. Then came number 17½, Halford's Bicycle Centre. Cycling was in fashion, so most people owned and rode a bike to get about. It was a busy shop, later moving to High Street, while Charles Handley, the chemist, took over the old premises. Numbers 18 and 19 Marketplace was a fine old grocer's shop owned by Mr. Wilson, who'd inherited it from his father. Mr. Wilson died and it was sold to Mr. Titcombe and his sons. The business dwindled away and a cheap chain store, Kay's, bought it. They painted a hideous great sign across the front of the old stone shop. Kay's Ways Pays. The shops have been restored and are now the Nationwide Building Society. It's one of the very few examples in the town of retaining a beautiful old building and adapting it to modern needs. 20 Marketplace, the Unicorn Inn, is a very old place, but not much of it can be seen from the marketplace. Hunt Edmund's brewing business was started there in the late 18th century. For many years the inn was kept by the Piggott family and was popular with gypsies and show people from Banbury Fair. There were 2 businesses up the Unicorn Yard, Thomas Pettifer and Co Limited, horse medicine manufacturers, and W. Woodall, fruit merchants. About 1954, Frank Wills became landlord, and he and his wife refurbished the old inn with beautiful antiques. He had a wonderful collection of antique firearms on display. Frank Wills died suddenly, and his wife moved away. 21 Marketplace was a drapery shop owned by Mr. and Mrs. Powell. Later, Mrs. Powell turned it into the Marketplace Post Office with considerable success. The shop was a fine old stone building, but the plain exterior gave no idea of how beautiful it was inside. The side and the back of the shop was the Prebendal House, number 1 Parson Street. There was a magnificent oak staircase leading up from the old oak door on the Parson Street side. Jacobean or earlier fireplaces, fine plasterwork and oak beams in many of the rooms. Now it's entirely altered and is the Southern Gasboard showrooms. The Powells had bought the shop from the Quaker, John Harlock, who also owned the 3 shops adjoining in Parson Street. Mr. Harlock lived to be 103. When he reached 100 years of age, the Quakers gave him a big party for him with a cake and 100 candles on it. He'd been mayor, and his portrait hangs in the town hall. One of his sons was a tutor to the Norwegian royal family, and also compiled an English-Norwegian dictionary. Mr. Harlock and his 2 unmarried daughters, Maria and Fanny, lived at the Lawn on the corner of St. John's Road and Old Parr. This has now been converted into 4 flats and renamed Juniper Court. Where the walled garden and orchard once was, now stands several modern houses and a block of flats, St John's Court. Fanny, with the help of Maria, ran a kindergarten for about 20 girls and boys aged between 5 and 9 in a large room over their kitchen. It was my first school. We all loved Fanny, but she couldn't keep order, so there was usually a riot. When things got too noisy, Harlock's old maid Nellie would stump up from her kitchen and restore order. We were all afraid of Maria, so when she was there we all behaved properly. A Miss Griffin came in twice a week to play the piano for dancing and singing lessons. When we got too noisy, she would crash on the piano and stand up and shout at us. Stanley Withy, the milkman's son, was the naughtiest boy in school. Once, for punishment, Fanny shut him in the bathroom, which we used as a cloakroom. When she went to let him out, he had filled the bath with water and was playing boats with our hats and swishing water all over the place. Teddy and George Clark, twin sons of the miller, Theo Clark, were always wrestling and fighting on the floor. Percy Whitlock, later an optician, was another noisy boy. He wore glasses, and as a great treat he would let us have a look at the sun through them. When the weather was fine, we had lessons or played games in the garden. Fanny had several hives of bees, which were often disturbed so that they would swarm, and we would have to rush indoors while Fanny donned her beekeeping gear and went after her bees. I don't think we learnt much, but it was a happy school. When Fanny gave up her school, I went to several other dame schools. Artist information. The paintings depicted in this audio version of the book, Memories of Banbury by Marjorie Lester, were painted by the author. They're watercolours which are included in the book, which is A4 in size. The size of the original paintings varied and are not precisely known. The paintings depict buildings and scenes of Banbury, some of which are still in existence and some of which have been demolished to make way for new development. The period depicted is broadly from the 1920s to the date of painting, which was the 1970s and 80s. The paintings were intended to be a visual diary for Marjorie to share with her children and to show her appreciation for the Banbury she had grown up in and mark the changes that had taken place in the town during her lifetime. We would like to thank the following people and organisations for helping us to create this lovely audio film book. Historic England for their generous support, Marjorie Lester's family for giving us permission to share her book, Memories of Banbury, which has enabled us to make it accessible to new audiences. Banbury Museum Reminiscence Officer Carey Morley, audio recording. Kaylee Burr, photography. Ian Clark and Chris Beamond, audio description readers. Karen Visser, audio descriptions writer, paintings. And of course, our wonderful Banbury Heritage Project participants who have shared their knowledge and wisdom with great generosity. This audio version of the book Memories of Banbury by Marjorie Lester is part of the Banbury Heritage Project, a flagship creative ageing project made possible with generous support from Historic England. The aim of the project is to make Banbury's heritage more accessible, particularly to people living with sight loss. The project also supports the aims of the Age Friendly Banbury project. If you would like to find out more, please email Helen Fountain. The email address is as follows, all in lowercase. HELENFOUNTAIN at AGEUKOXFORDSHIRE.org.uk. Audio descriptions of the paintings. Chapter 2, Cedar Villa, Boxhedge. This painting includes the caption Neathrop, 1920. The painting is of a domestic scene in the grounds of a large home. A glass house with its rainwater butt is to our left. Alongside is the driveway leading up to a closed wooden entrance gate set in a red brick wall. Fan-shaped trees are in a herbaceous border, in front of which is a row of dark, spiky dots. Hedgehogs. A small girl clutching a doll walks with a woman in a cloak and bonnet along the driveway toward a woman in black uniform and white apron. In the centre foreground, cocks and hens peck at the grass. Behind them, a man with a moustache and wearing dark grey trousers and braces and a shirt with sleeves rolled up pushes a lawnmower near a flower bed of irises. To his right is a woman with a bouffant hairstyle, dressed in a yellow blouse and a brown skirt, boots and elbow-length gloves. She carries a hand fork and a basket and appears to step out from behind a flowering tree, in front of which is a huge black and tan dog. In the background to our left is the white double-storey Georgian villa with an elegant facade. A large dog and a black cat are in its colonnaded portico. Beyond, under a pale sky, trees tower over the red brick buildings where a rooster with its wings outstretched does a jig on the wall. Chapter 2, Quaker Meeting House, Horse Fair. This painting depicts the simplicity of the building's exterior and the plain attire of the Quakers attending a worship. The close-up viewpoint is from the surrounding grounds, looking towards the rectangular facade that takes up 2/3 of the composition. In the foreground, the worshippers are depicted on a stone slab path alongside the building. They're headed towards the left where a man stands in a porchway. A woman holding the hand of a little girl wearing bright blue is first to near the entrance, followed by a woman being hurried along by an enthusiastic boy, and then a man in dark clothes with a wide-brimmed hat and umbrella. The women wear brown coats and bonnets. The porch is perpendicular to the corner of the building and has an unadorned column either side of the door that's framed by glazed blue and clear glass panels. The grey slate roof and tawny brown stone is painted to resemble the local materials used. A horizontal band of stonework divides 3 2/2 sash windows. There's the outline of a date stone between 2 of the lower windows. In the left background, dark foliage stands out against a cloudy sky, and to our right, a tall tree partially conceals the edge of the meeting house. 3 headstones in the bottom left corner are a reminder that the land purchased in the mid-17th century was initially for a burial ground. Chapter 2, Large Meeting Room, Quaker Meeting House. This painting, portrayed in warm yellow tones, illustrates a worship in progress in a well-lit hall with dado wall panels and oil lamp chandelier. The painting is from the vantage point of the gallery, looking down toward the elders and overseers at the far end, and the men, women and children on benches either side of the hall and with their backs to us in the foreground. At the centre is a dark table with a yellow rug with a bound book next to a green vase of red and yellow flowers. Behind the table sit the elders and overseers on high-backed benches in 2 tiers. Dressed in their grey or black, the men have wide-brimmed hats and long beards, and the women wear bonnets. In the top right, a wash of sunlight streams through a window high above a sash window. Below, between the foreground bench and the side benches, is a black cylindrical heater with a pipe protruding from the wall. The Quakers, some sit straight, others stooped, and many have their eyes closed in apparent meditation, save for a woman standing behind a bench to the left in a dark blue coat, matching scarf and bonnet. She is depicted speaking to the assembled, with her head turned to face our direction. Chapter 2. Barleymow, Warwick Road. This painting is on a light brown strip depicting a country road in the foreground. An impression of tall trees and a blue sky full of clouds takes up the rest of the painting. There's a simplicity and quietness about this watercolour. No people are depicted. The pub, with its slate roof and prominent chimney stacks, is a combination of a triple-storey building on our right and a single storey to the left. An entrance porch has a triangle-shaped arch resting on columns flanking the doorway and a sash window either side. Above the middle row of 3 windows and under the eaves of the facade is a bricked-up middle window with Barleymow in bold black capitals across its surface. A hanging swing sign with the pub name projects from under the eaves on the right-hand corner. The dirt road accentuates a darker brown band along the base of the pub, which is painted a yellowish white. This warm tint has translucent quality, enhanced by the black pen and ink outline of the narrow entrance porch, the tooth-shaped edging of the attached buildings and their windowsills and lintels. The effect is like the moment sunshine pokes through a break in clouds, lighting up freshly painted render. Chapter 2. The Workhouse, Warwick Road. The building is painted in light, uniform strokes, emphasising the vast presence of this red brick Victorian institution, towering over weary-looking figures in dark clothes and caps. Most of the painting is taken up by the facade of the building, with 3 large chimney stacks and 2 tall incinerator chimneys. The many narrow rectangular windows are a reminder of the numbers housed here. In the immediate foreground is a pale green half-circle of grass. Between the workhouse and this grassy patch, the driveway forms a grey semicircle. 3 men with walking sticks are depicted near the right-hand corner. The one nearest the edge has a long white beard and appears to have stopped to take a rest. The next uses a stick as a prop over one shoulder to hang his belongings, and the third trudges towards the entrance, where a man stands in the doorway. In the left corner, 2 men push a wooden handcart loaded with timber, and a third walks alongside, a bundle of wood under one arm. They're shown in conversation walking away from the workhouse. Behind these departing men is another dressed in black. The only man depicted in white, the cook perhaps, is seen entering a side door. The pale winter sky and dirty smoke from the many chimneys adds to the sombre atmosphere. Chapter 2. The 3 Pigeons, 3 Horseshoes, at entrance to Castle Street. This painting depicts 2 pubs, the 3 Pigeons on the left and the 3 Horseshoes on the right, and in the foreground is a cream-coloured road. The 3 Pigeons is a timber-framed building, part thatched, with 3 chimney stacks and a low brown door set in the middle of the building. It's a 2-storey building with 3 windows on the ground floor and 3 windows on the first floor. The 3 Horseshoes is an off-white 3-storey building with a grey slate roof and a chimney stack on either side. There's a green door on the left-hand side of the building and a larger door, also green, on the right-hand side of the building, possibly an entrance for a horse and cart. There are 8 windows in total, 2 on the ground floor and 3 each on the first and second floors. In between the 2 pubs is a narrow street with a sign above saying Castle Street. The rear of a cart can be seen moving down the street. On the right-hand side, in front of the 3 horseshoes, is another horse and cart. This one is stationary and unattended. The horse is brown and the cart has 2 wheels. On the left, in front of the 3 pigeons, is a hand cart being tended by 3 men, all wearing brown overalls and hats. 2 of them have red neckerchiefs on and one is carrying a shovel. The cart is full of what could be horse manure. Another figure in a lilac cloak and a brown hat stands to the left of the 3 pigeons and is carrying a small yellow bag. The scene is peaceful and suggests people going about their daily business. Chapter 2. The Angel, Marketplace. Poultry, rabbits and eggs are for sale in front of the Angel Inn, which takes up most of the left and centre middle ground. In the left foreground, 2 wooden coops on wheels, packed with chickens, surround a couple of rabbit hutches. One has black rabbits, the other white rabbits. 2 baskets with eggs are on the ground in front of this display. To the right of the inn, a narrow bending road on an incline has terraced houses either side. What looks like a Humber soft-top tourer car heads up the slope. Corner shop number 42 with its front canopy is to the right of the road at the edge of the painting. A woman in profile facing our right and wearing a winter coat and boots seems to be deciding what to purchase. She's depicted before the hutches and baskets directly in front of the entrance to the Angel, where a man can be seen about to enter the inn. Another man, most likely to be the stall holder, stands nearby, facing us with his arms behind his back. Under the corner shop canopy, a woman in green pushes in a pushchair a little girl dressed in red. The chicken combs and wattles match her dress and the Angel's flowers. Chapter 2. Blencows and the Bear, Marketplace. This painting is the watercolour equivalent of a snapshot of daily life in a small town. The wet flagstone grey brushstroke from left to right in the foreground gives the impression of a gradient as Castle Street North, its sign on the side of William Blenco's cake shop, turns into the marketplace. The cake shop, with its prominent display windows, is painted a soft strawberry pink. The pub, in light ale yellow, has a model of a bear on its hind legs outside the front entrance. The attached buildings span the width of the painting and a pale blue sky above. In the centre foreground, men with walking sticks stand chatting. One in a long coat, matching cap and dark trousers. The other in tweed jacket and breeches, wearing a fedora. To our left, a man with a white apron and a large baker's tray balanced on his head is shown walking down towards Blenco's. On the right, in front of the bear, a woman dressed in bright blue, carrying a shopping basket, faces our direction. Behind her, near the edge of the painting, a man with a folded hand trolley stands under the inside entrance canopy beneath a hanging sign with the bear. Chapter 2. Cornhill Marketplace. This painting shows a detailed scene from one side of the town square looking towards an ornate lamppost on a plinth and pedestal in front of building facades. These include a bank, covered passageway and the Plough Inn. Adjacent to the lamppost on our left is an ornate red and yellow brick frontage with a slate turret roof. Directly opposite is a large building similar to a Greek temple with a standing figure on its roof. This is the original Cornhill Exchange. Next to the imposing classical facade are two red brick buildings. B.R. Morland Stationers, post office printers and newsagents, with its protruding four-sided front, and near the right edge of the painting, Salmon and Catch, the noted store for sweets, chocolates and ices, advertising Cadbury's and fries in its window. In the immediate left corner, two men are depicted attending a horse and cart laden with sacks of corn. A man in black, carrying a brown briefcase, crosses the square in the direction of a bank where a man stands in its doorway. A woman is depicted emerging from the backlit covered passageway, and a man can be seen in the entrance to the inn. A man is about to enter the building with its classical facade. Behind him a dog sits on the pavement. Nearby, two men stand chatting, and a girl posts a letter in B.R. Morland's wall-mounted postbox. In the foreground, right, a man pushing a sack truck walks across the square near B.R. Morland's green handcart by the roadside, and a dog is nearby. To his left, a woman dressed in bright blue, carrying a black handbag, speaks to a man with a bicycle. A man in brown tweeds and a straw hat with a walking stick has his back to us and is headed towards the covered passageway. A pale, cloudy sky on the top half of the painting hints at the sun casting shadows from left to right across the square with its Victorian lamps and lanterns. Chapter 2. Marketplace, West Side. This painting has a cinematic quality with its detailed representation against an architectural backdrop of people going about their day in the square. On our left is Robbins Brothers Ironmongers and Gunsmiths. It has a display of goods on the pavement in front. The shop lies over a narrow passageway attached to the side of a four-storey classical facade with an arched entrance. Ground floor shops, both sides of this archway, are W. Rayner's dress shop to our left and Halford's Cycle Centre on the right. Above the entrance is a cinema and cafe sign and a large board announcing Charlie Chaplin in the Gold Rush. Next door is A. Titcomb and Sons with an elegant pair of second-storey bow windows. Under its double-pitched roof, a sign advertises wines and Gilby gin. Bisto, Typho tea, Saxa salt and Ideal milk are in large capitals on the ground floor display windows. A man carrying a small vat exits the passageway. Titcomb shopkeepers in their aprons are outside observing passers-by, which include a woman with a white headscarf and long coat pushing a bicycle. In the archway, a man in evening dress suit is shown greeting couples as they enter the foyer. Near the foreground, left corner, a street sweeper in a floppy hat with a red scarf tied under his chin is bent over a besom broom sweeping the ground, while a policeman appears to be watching him. In the centre of the square, a one-horse carriage with a man dressed in riding jumpers, tweed jacket and hard hat attends to the horse. A woman in ermine fur-trimmed red coat and hat walks behind a boy carrying a box with purchases in the direction of the carriage. In the foreground right corner, another smartly dressed woman tugs on her yapping dog's lead as it tries to lunge at a startled dog 3 times its size. Chapter 2. 18, 19, 20 and 21 Marketplace. This painting is a close-up of 2 attached buildings, painted at a slight angle from left to right corner. On the blue-grey pavement in the left foreground, 3 men are seen striding toward the right. Dressed in black, 2 wear red scarves and 1 shields himself with an umbrella. They pass a timber-framed building with a three-gabled roof. Each gable has an attic window and a bow window below. The symmetry strengthened by stone surrounds. Beneath the bay window closest to the adjacent building is the unicorn sign over a passageway joining the two buildings, under which a man with a walking stick is depicted entering the market from the street behind. The ground floor of the unicorn is painted a warm yellow, its door and two rectangular windows in matching green. The building to the right has a simple brown timber and yellow render facade with J. Harlock high-class drapers on the fascia board above the large display windows and recessed doorway. On the pavement in front of the drapers is a Royal Mail pillar box. Immediately to its right, near the edge of the painting, a woman in bright purple, a white feather adorning her wide-brimmed black hat and clutching a handbag under her left arm, faces the advancing men.